Welcome, Madam Secretary. You know, we all deeply mourn the tragic loss of 4 extraordinarily brave Americans, including our distinguished Ambassador, Christopher Stevens. But one of my top concerns is that we seem to be relearning the same lessons again and again and again. Madam Secretary, after the August 1988 bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, Admiral Krause sat exactly where you sit, that was 12 years ago, and told the subcommittee that I chaired at the time that, quote, in our investigations of the bombings, the ARB boards were shocked how similar the lessons learned were to those drawn by the Bobby Inman Commission some 14 years before that. In other words, in 1985. In direct response, I authored a bipartisan law, the Admiral Nance Meg Donovan Foreign Relations Act, and in it we had a title, the Secure Embassy Construction and Counterterrorism Act of 1999, to upgrade diplomatic security and residences, to improve threat assessments and facilities, emergency action plans, security threat lists, perimeter distances, that is setbacks, for example, crisis management training, diplomatic security training, rapid response procedures, storage or emergency equipment like fire suppressant capabilities, and increased anti-terrorism in Africa. Before 1998, there were 1,000 security specialists. Today, there are over 3,100. I agree we need more, but how present-day security personnel and assets are deployed are, above all, a leadership issue. And clearly, we have and had the diplomatic security assets that could have been deployed to Benghazi. When it comes to what you knew, Madam Secretary, and what requests were made of you and the Department to beef up security in Benghazi, there are disturbing parallels to Kenya and Tanzania. Prior to East Africa terrorist bombings, U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, Prudence Bushnell, repeatedly asked Secretary Madeleine Albright for more security upgrades, and the ambassador's request was rejected, and the loss of life, as we all know, was horrific. There are numerous press reports that U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens, and his team made repeated requests for security assistance. So my questions are these. 1, you defined taking responsibility for Benghazi in your testimony a few moments ago in terms, and only in terms, of during and after the terrorist attacks. What about before the attack on September 11, 2012? What did you personally and your staff, when did you become aware of Ambassador Stevens and his team's request for security upgrades? What exactly did you do in response? You obviously were very close to him. Did he ask you personally at any time? When you say a moment ago that Ambassador Pickering's ARB perhaps didn't think you relevant to be interviewed, you're the most relevant person of all. You're the leader. You're on top of it all. So I would join with my colleague, Elena Ross-Layton. You should have been interviewed and very important questions asked. And were you personally in any way at fault?
Well, first, Congressman, I'm well aware of the work that you did after the 1998 bombings, and I think that work and the legislation that you championed has been very important in protecting our people around the world. We have been not only reviewing but continuing to implement the recommendations of all the former ARBs, and the 18 previous ARBs resulted in 164 recommendations, and we have been very clear that the overwhelming majority have been implemented. A handful such recommendations were, by their very nature, requiring continuous implementation, like what kind of security upgrades or radio communication was necessary. And there were a few that were only partially implemented because of some separate security concerns that would have raised. But there was the need for ongoing funding. You remember that Admiral Crowe said we wanted $2.2 billion for building embassies. We had a number of embassies that were built in those early years, thanks to your legislation. Then it petered off. You know, we put so much time and attention into Iraq and Afghanistan, trying to make sure that we secured our people there. We sent a lot of our diplomatic security personnel there. And so we had a slowdown over a number of years in our ability to build new Inman facilities.
Understood.
And now the latest ARB is saying, let's get back and do this again because there's no substitute for it.
I'm almost out of time, Madam Secretary. When did you become aware of Ambassador Stevens' requests, and how did you respond to it? And did he ever personally ask you to be involved?
No, no, and
So you didn't get in?
No, that any of the requests, any of the cables having to do with security did not come to my attention.